Perfect. Hi everyone. Can you hear me perfectly? I'm super excited about this panel. I know Mel had some scary troubles today, so I'm glad you could finally make it, and I think we can almost get started and maybe wait, just 1 minute. So for people who want to join, they can all join in. But yeah, I'm just excited to see everyone. I think it's been a lot of information today for sure on application security in one day. Alina, I saw you in the chat. Yes, from
Yes, and I've learned so much, so many people sharing their experience. It's just, yeah, so much information that could be useful.
yeah, for sure. At least I hope it is useful, and at least it's maybe provoked some thoughts, reflections at least, or challenge kind of the thoughts of some people for sure. So I think yeah, we can start. So I'm yeah excited to have the three of you here. Mel, you're with 30 years of technology and security experience, being well, CIO, CISO, you navigated for so many different complex landscapes on the compliance, on application development, on security, on everything. You've touched, you went through two IPOs and mergers and several mergers and acquisitions. So you bring a lot of expertise to the table. Ariel, you have an incredible experience as well. You're now a security manager at the Datadog for the application security, and you've actually built and scaled the all product security program at Twilio, and the vulnerability. The democratizing vulnerability management there, as we discussed on our last podcast together, with all the incredible experience. And you, Alina, you also have so many, I think you 20 years or 10, I don't remember exactly, because I remember Mel was very surprised by that, of her experience starting as a Q&A engineer, former developer, now application security engineer at Toast, and we are very passionate about Security Champions program. I know, and you build a whole culture of security champions
It's
there.
it's always great when they start off at 4 years old doing the work.
Yeah, and that's passion of application security at the youngest age. That's where it starts. I know that some people already start to build it in with their kids. At least, like, right now you see more and more children's books that come out on the security. I think that's kind of a trend, at least that I saw on LinkedIn. So who knows, at least in Europe for sure, that's a huge trend. And I'm really excited to discuss, with all of you, with your experience on how to build and scale application security program, and especially, like, is it realistic, and what to focus on, and what should be the primary focus on all of these cases. So maybe just to get started, if you can share briefly the AppSec program that you scaled, and what your main focus was. So maybe Ariel, you can get started.
Yes. So one of the programs that I worked on scaling was called Democratize Vulnerability Management, which was to shift the ownership of risk from security teams onto engineering teams, so that we can tackle risks in a timely manner and build a culture of trust. One of the programs I'm looking at scaling right now are secure defaults, which we call security baselines, which we use to supplement our security reviews.
So now, you, Mel.
So I had a scaling component around about 20 different mergers that had happened at one company. So it was, how do you herd the cats? How do you get them to agree on some uniformity, and then how do you scale that, right? How do you get that to, and it took a while. Because as I mentioned previously, developers and architects, I love to call them now, because I was one at one point, and still kind of am, the divas of development. So every one of them wanted something their way, but scaling that was interesting, and the amount of time it took was even more interesting.
And now you are, Alina.
Yes, having almost 2 years experience in tech definitely helped figuring this, but scaling security is probably the most interesting and challenging thing, and like the most. This is probably the security champion, scaling security champion program and framework. The base of it is what I'm interested the most. I'm glad to share experience. I would.
I think your sound dropped off at one point. I'm not sure if it's on my side.
Okay,
I can't hear.
you can hear? Okay. Oh yeah, security champions is basically what I'm the most passionate about, and that I would like to learn more about it. I would be happy to share.
I think it still drops off sometimes.
Better?
A little bit.
Okay, I will. We can continue.
I think it's something that happens all the time, like some tech problems for sure. So I mean, it's something happens. We just spend one of the talks before 5 minutes to fix the presentation. It's no more.
Does this sound better?
Yes, that's
Awesome.
perfect.
Great.
Yeah, so I think maybe if you could tell, since we heard only maybe parts of what you wanted to say,
This is always
it.
happens with live demos and stuff like that. So yeah, I will be happy to share more of my experience about security champions and how to scale that, because this is my passion at this moment, and I hope to that my experience will help with that. And I'm not representing my employer, so I will be sharing my personal, professional experience.
Great. And well, Mal, you mentioned that you've spent a really long time, I think 20 companies to merge and 20 development teams. Like, how long did it take, and how long did it take, to measure the actual impact?
Yeah, so most recently was 4 companies. The first 2 of the 4 that needed to merge, so it was Codebase, Data, and their AppSec, right? So of course, AppSec is the last, and there wasn't a rush to create a standard across the other 2 while these 2 were merging, but I dove in kind of in the middle of that. It took them a little over a year just for the code base and the data components, and then it took about another. It was a long run, but it was somewhere between 3 to 6 months before they even had something that was reportable, and the rest of it took a whole hell of a lot longer because it was 2 completely different platforms, fully flushed out. So that took almost a year and a half. And the fourth one, I just gave up. I was like, y'all figure it out. And I ended up going somewhere else. The other group that I had with the 20, they were simpler because the code bases were simpler, and the best thing about it was they were not mature. So they didn't really have, it was what I call the MacGyvers of DevOps, and and they just kind of strung a couple things together, so it was easy to kind of just go in and replace. But it was the acceptance of, right, getting 20 different development teams to agree on the tools that could scale on what they needed. So it was a lot of gathering requirements, and actually we should just call this whole day AppSec therapy, right? Because people are probably like, oh my God, I had to go through that. Yeah, that's pretty much where I was at with them. Is I had to be the therapist, not not the architect, not the CIO. It was like, okay, let's walk through, why do you need a tool, let's go ahead. Okay. So it's more of that scaling on experience and exposure, and kind of why we needed to justify certain other methods and tools. But yeah, good times. I had hair during that time. You see what happened.
Wow, that's that's all the stress, as they say. Yeah, I mean, they do
Thank
say
you.
that with the stress you're losing hair. So
Mhm.
who
By the way,
knows?
I'm only 24. So you see what it's done to my, yeah.
Yeah, you've started learning about security even before you were born.
Before I was born, yes.
Yeah. And
So,
you, Ariel, I know your Mel just mentioned that it's more like a therapy, so more focusing, on people. I know in your experience, you focused a lot also on the process around scaling. So maybe can you tell more about the process that you've implemented and how you measured, the impact?
Definitely. I think when you look to scale a program or to adapt a program, the situation that I was in for our democratized vulnerability management program was that we were adapting it to an org that was much larger. So it was part of an acquisition group. Segment at the time was around like 400 or 500, and Twilio was at 6,000. And so we felt that this program would help us remediate vulnerabilities in a timely manner, have engineers own risk, and just improve the culture around risk itself. But in order to actually scale it to a different company of a different size and a different culture, we had to, our first step was to actually just like do an interview with all perform interviews across security engineers, product engineers, and leadership to understand what the current pain points are with the current system, and to see if we could adapt and iterate and improve on a solution that kind of ultimately worked for everyone.
Okay. And how long did it take, the whole process?
So it took maybe like a month just to build something in Jira, just to like actually get where you report your vulnerabilities in. It took 3 quarters to get the buy-in that we needed to get everyone agreeing to the direction that we're going to take. That took the most amount of time. There were a lot of different sessions chatting with folks, different ways to communicate, different priorities. And then I think a year afterwards, we continued to iterate, building out different types of dashboards, engaging with different engineering leaders. So the implementation wasn't done after the system itself was built. It really was around how we interact with engineers and how we promote awareness on managing and triaging the risks you have and remediating them in a timely manner.
Okay, so there is actually a part where you have to apply, soft skills by getting this buy-in and focus at least on the people part in that sense. And I know you, Alina, you really love to focus on the people part and on the security champions. So how, when you scale, do you actually, measure the impact of security champions program?
So I think metrics is key, and when it comes to measuring, right? So we haven't, as Tanya said earlier today, we have to have goals, because otherwise, if we don't know what we want to build, and if we don't know how we want to measure it, we won't get any support from leadership, because we won't be able to present them with selling points. So in my experience, it's important to start early, right? Like shift left with everything. It's not about like software development. It's about like building anything, right? So if we are building a program, right? We have to start with something before we roll it out, before we start testing it. We need to come up with metrics, with goals, what we want to see at the end, how we are going to measure it, because people is very important. It's a crucial part, and they're not resources, right? They're living people. They have something in mind. They want something. They have passions. They have ambitions. We need to figure out what we can give them in order to secure their support, their help. This is why working with people is more difficult, but metrics is good for them as well, because if they know uh, how they perform, right? So if there is some metric, so they could see that they're doing great, management would see that those people are doing a great job. They will recognize them, they will reward them. And it's very important. Getting back to gamification, what that Dustin said about earlier today, it's an important part. This is why metrics could be helpful to everyone, and building the program with this in mind before we roll it out could help secure support as well, because managers will see why they need to give time for their people to work on security stuff, to learn about security, to be part of that and building the culture.
And what is, for example, the top three, metrics that you measure, that you define, let's say, on the people side for them on a personal level, and the ones, that after you show to the leadership?
So I've been playing around with a lot of stuff throughout my career, and working with different team, and in QA and software engineering and security and everywhere. It's different. You need to know what your audience needs, because you need to work with the managers and see what they find useful, what's important to them. Like engineering managers, that will be something different from QA management, for example. And for security, right? What's important for security? So metrics could be anything, and it's different because security champions are not for R&D and software engineering only, right? So it could be we could have champions like in other orgs, in marketing, I don't know, customer support or somewhere else.
Yeah.
And every org will have something different they want to see. And every person on the security champion team will have something different they want. Some people might be interested in learning more, in some more training and influence, like be the security person on their team, so the team will come to them. Some people might be interested in, I don't know, maybe even switching fields eventually. Like, this is my story. So this is why it's different. I cannot tell you one thing. Well, being a software engineer in the past, I can say that maybe vulnerability management would be a good example to showcase what would be the metric. It could be number of vulnerabilities. I don't know, the number of security issues of any kind in any org. It's it would be up to each company and each team to decide what metrics, but metrics should be based on the goals.
I think metrics, though, can be quite difficult, because I think when we first start looking at metrics, one of the first things we look at is coverage metrics. How much of the org has had security engineers trained, and how can I increase that number? There was a podcast with Will Larson, who wrote the staff engineering book, and someone that I just really like their words of advice. And one of the things he said is, if you share coverage metrics with your leadership, the only feedback that you can get is increased coverage. And if you time box that increased coverage within a specific amount of time, that means you're incentivizing a security champion program to go from live recordings where you're really engaging with the engineers to recorded, so that folks can get more people onboarded onto the security champions program. But that doesn't necessarily translate to a better security culture. And that's something I've really struggled with, is how do you find a way to understand that the security activities you do, especially earlier on in the development life cycle, actually create a meaningful output that you can share with leaders, with other security teams, and with your engineering teams, to say the amount of time that you put in for your security champions program, we can start to see that output elsewhere. One of the things that I really liked is the idea of a net promoter score, which is one that you say, like, how likely are you to recommend this course or this program to someone else? And that could be a potential way to get a pulse as to, are we making an impact on the engineering culture? Are engineers in rooms that security aren't present, are they saying, hey, you should take this security champions course, and recommending it to others because they see it as valuable? And that's something maybe that we could measure the kind of qualitatively.
And
No, I did exactly that with a bunch of courseware that we had brought in, and because again, I know I made an assumption these were the best things for the organization based on what I knew. So, but I can't make that assumption, with a 10-20 year gap in mindset. You're right. There were some courses they were flagging them as horrible. I'm like, okay, gone. Let's replace it. But on top of that, I think from a metric standpoint, to relate to that is, once you've got a baseline of whatever you want to measure, right? Number of fixes related to security, this, that, the other, it's how do you create that burn down, right? So if you've got high, medium, lows, critical, blah, 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 and you identify them, you're not fixing them yet. You're not, you haven't put them in through the funnel. It's identifying them, right? Yeah, we've scanned, we've got this, we've got all the things in place, the pillars in place. Now we start to measure how much time are we allocating for that? What are the number of tickets related to security versus other fixes, right? And then that's when you can start measuring some of those to see if there's a shift. And then what you report on what's that burn down on that big list that you just scanned, on the big list of what's being delivered. And my biggest challenge was convincing the engineering leads and the VPs of application development to allocate time towards this backlog of criticals. I'm not talking about highs and mediums and lows, just the criticals. And that mindset of, can we just take like one, during this next sprint, just work on it, right? So that you introduce the concept of it. And that's been the challenge. If you don't have the mindset of starting all the way at the left and then having to try to introduce, like, way too late. We've got a backlog of these, but then you can start to fill that in. You work the culture, the people, the personalities, and the process to say, hey, now that you guys have a pretty good understanding of what we need to do, let's look at the tools. Let's look at bringing this way ahead before, so that future code, all the 99% of the shit you're developing now, because you're only spending 1% of your time trying to bring down the security queue. Now at least that's a little bit cleaner, a little bit more visibility, and a little bit more addressable before it goes out. I've lived through, and I think I talked about this in the past, the maturity model of the teams, right? Some teams are like, yep, we're good, we've got this in place. Other teams are like, looking at the butterflies in the fields, and they're just, coding, like, no, let's pull it together here, folks.
Yeah, it sounds like I've been through some cultural obstacles for sure. So, how would you recommend, to overcome it? If, let's say, someone, gets started and needs to scale their program, how would you recommend them to actually not give up maybe straight away? Or maybe you will recommend, to quit on the spot. I don't know. But what would be your advice there?
I'll
I
leave it
would
up
say,
to yeah, go ahead.
yeah, so it's a very good question, because I've seen a lot like this, and I've heard a lot of stories where people would start something, building a program, scalable program. Were building security champions programs and stuff like that, and then failed and just quit and wouldn't want to try something else because they wouldn't, they didn't believe that it could work. So what I've found that worked for me is that building a proper program before presenting it to people, allowing them some, like, basically to learn, make mistakes, coaching, mentoring people. Mentorship is a huge help for scaling, because people could mentor each other, they could share knowledge and build the culture, and new people would come and they will learn from those who've been with the program for a longer time, sharing all the knowledge, helping each other if something is needed. It's important. This is why education is important as well, right? So I've heard a lot from people, they want to be proficient in security topics, but they don't know how to approach this, and they need training, they might need some workshops. So it's all like I try to look at it as a framework. So you create a framework and roll it out, not the process, not tools. Framework includes all of that, including mentorship and education and just being there for people, so they know that you're interested in this, you're passionate about this, you're borderline annoying to them, like they would see a lot of you. And this is in my view, from my experience, this is what helps while communicating with people, different levels from different orgs, different teams. You have to bring this energy, and they will pick up on that energy. So yeah, that helps. And I also wanted to note that, following the previous speaker, not everyone is interested in security, and it's unfair to expect that all software engineers will be jumping on threat modeling or something like that, and they will be happy about that and they will be passionate about that. That's not how it works. This is why we have to rely on volunteers, on passionate people who are interested in security, who want to learn more, and then let them lead their teams, their orgs, be like influence the rest of engineering, like if we are saying about talking about engineering here. So this is how we could scale. This is how we could spread our thoughts and energy, through those people, our allies, our liaisons between, security, and because it's impossible to hire as many security engineers as needed to handle everything. We have to trust those people who agreed to help, and like even having one security engineer for 50 employees is not feasible, to be honest. So this is my vision of this. We have to rely on people. We have to trust them. We have to enable them and let them, well, make mistakes once in a while. It's fine.
Have you ever been a borderline annoying with the security?
All the time. I hope my people I work with and been working with before. So I know I'm like that. And I heard one time, one person said to me, it was 4 p.m. and he said, like, you're so optimistic and energetic at 4 p.m. How do you do this? It's weird. And it's been like a long time ago that I heard that. I was like,
Energy
okay, is it like good weird or bad weird? I don't know, but it's
Yeah.
I think for me, when it comes to scaling an AppSec program, it's knowing that the different types of programs we have, like training, threat modeling, automations for secure defaults, that all of these are different tools in a toolbox, and that you shouldn't have one program be the only program that exists within your program, or else you're just using a hammer for every single thing. I think being able to reduce the amount of work that you add onto engineers, reduce a bit of that cognitive load, and add those secure defaults so that they don't have to think about the 10 different ways to implement it the secure way. You're offering them the default path. That's not going to solve all of your issues. They need to be aware that this default path exists, and that's where training comes in. You need to be able to interact with them in order to solve some of the problems where if a team wants to implement SSRF as a service and that's a valid business need, your secure defaults won't come in handy there. And that's where you would need that partnership work, the champions to raise those issues and to connect with security. And I also think being able to have data-driven decisions so that you know what your team prioritizes. So being able to pull your results from bug bounty, pen test, the different threats that exist, and using that to figure out, here's how you prioritize the threat models that you do, the pen tests that need to be done, the secure baselines that need to be built today. All of that together, the different tools work together to build a house and be able to kind of adapt to the different needs that you have.
I
That's a
think
very
we're
good
at
point.
the end, of the panel, so we have 1 minute left. I don't know if the audience wants to ask any questions. I just want to leave some time for people to ask their questions if they have any. Otherwise, I guess.
We talked about it all. We covered it all. They
Yeah.
have no questions.
I think so. Probably 6 hours in as well. Makes a bit of a toll. But I do have one quick question. I think we've covered the people part, but sometimes you also need, as you mentioned before, buying part. But I think sometimes you also need a budget. Because, for example, let's say even for security champions programs, if you need a tool or you need to build a tool, you might need some budget. So if you can give a quick recap, how do you justify, the budget, how you get this budget for scale?
That's
Beg,
a
borrow, and
question.
steal.
Well, it's
Put it under
it
learning and
might be a solution.
development. You put it under, whatever existing budget there is, and say, can we get some of this? Can we get some of that? I found finding alternative tools for the ones that we're paying has helped. Right? Hey, anybody know an open source version of XYZ that we can use instead of paying this? Or even better, flipping over on the IT side and asking them if they've got specific things that they can replace, or if they have features that they can replace some of the DevSecOps components, so that way the costs go down, and then we can use that budget towards it. And in reality, if it's not at the kind of HR or learning and development level, especially for champion programs or anything else, it's really, really hard, right? It's you're squeezing blood from a stone. But for me, it's being creative with specific vendors. And I said this across, I'm not just saying it here. I just want to be very clear. I've said this across many other interviews. The startups that are willing to be able to work with you on what you need in your organization, straight out. I mean, I have a list of 60 in just the last 2 years that I've talked to, 3 years that I've talked to be able to try to figure out all kinds of solutions for different folks. So the startups are the key to a lot of that savings.
Yeah.
Also, what Dustin shared before was very interesting, because there are different types of rewards for people, and not all of them require any budget. So it could be anything. So theoretically, we could use what we have at each company, right? Usually companies have something, or it could be public recognition, or it could be more, opportunities for people to grow, or maybe, I don't know, maybe use it for promotions. It could be a lot of stuff, but every company is different. So they will have to, each company will have to figure out what they have and what their people want, because people, it's very important to learn what people want, because this is the only way to keep them, happy.
Yeah.
I would say +1 to that. There are so many ways that you can do security recognition for free. that I don't necessarily think you need a budget. So if you do get pushback, but generally like speaking to the outcomes that you can deliver, if you had a budget, finding some creative ways to get some things for free, and then demonstrating like a build versus buy decision. I think those all go into it.
Great. Well, thank you so much all for sharing your insights. It was great. I think we also had some laughs about Mel mostly, but thank you so much. It was
Thank you.
great, and yeah, for everyone, recording will be available after the event.